Hello and welcome to a special live edition of ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and today I'm joined in the studio by a panel of experts to discuss the major upcoming news from the White House. United States President Donald Trump is scheduled to give a speech in just a moment's time, where he's expected to reverse over 70 years of United States policy by officially recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. With me now is Professor Moshe Amirav from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, COO of Standing Together, Israel advocate and international speaker Ari Fold, and Israeli politician and Major General in the Reserves, Uzi Dayan. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Now, all right, until President Trump makes his remarks, we won't be able to analyze what he will say, but until that time, we can look at what everybody else is kind of saying the fallout might be, and with that, let's begin our conversation with the two-state solution. So, starting with how the Palestinians are saying recognizing Jerusalem would completely take the two-state solution off the table. I'd like to first address that, and I'll start with you, Professor Amirav. Does it? How would you address that?
I'll say that the Palestinians, and it's not only the Palestinians, because the only issue between us and the Palestinians in what is called the long time conflict between us is Jerusalem. It's even not Jerusalem, it's Temple Mount. And this is, when I'm speaking about the partners, the players, as we say, in this game, it's not the Palestinians only. We have the whole Arab world, we have the whole Muslim world, and they are much more annoyed about what Trump is saying, much more than the Palestinians. Because we are speaking now not only about two-state solution, and then not about dividing or not dividing Jerusalem. We are speaking about a place that is so dear to 2 billion millions of Muslims all over the world. So when he is saying it, whatever he will say, it touches not only the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Well, you know, I feel like I'm in like the flat earth society that all of a sudden decided to decree that the earth is actually round. Jerusalem's been the capital of the Jewish people in the state and the land of Israel for 3,000 years. And the fact that we're getting so excited, someone says, yes, it is, it shows a little bit of, you know, what the society is about. The two-state solution, I feel, is on the same level. You know, you said that Jerusalem is holy to, it was 1.6 or 3 billion or 2 billion, whatever it is. The fact of the matter is that Jerusalem's been the Jewish capital for 3,000 years. It has not been a Muslim capital ever in the history of the world. It has not been an Arab capital ever in the history of the world. And it's time to, you know, let's cut the charades. It's good that Trump is doing this.
So then to that end, why could Ramallah not realistically be the new capital of a Palestinian state?
Well, you know, I think the obvious reason is because that Jerusalem, among other things, is an excuse. They want to eradicate the whole of Israel, and they will embrace any excuse. And perhaps if Trump's declaration brings an end to the two-state solution, that would just be an added benefit. Because setting up a two-state solution, as I've said many times before, is just a slogan for setting up yet another misogynistic, homophobic, Muslim-majority tyranny. And why would anyone see any benefit in that?
There is not a two-state solution for a long time. I mean, everybody continues to speak about the peace process. It's actually the rest in peace process, because we don't have a real partner for a two-state solution. Let's take just Gaza as an example. Are we talking about 3 states for 2 people, or what? And to terrorism. There is no two-state solution with such a terrorism. And finally, we don't have a partner to a real peace agreement, which will start with the, let's say, the words, end of conflict, no more claims. We don't have a partner for that.
The axiom of the two-state solution is as fabricated as Jerusalem being a Muslim holy city. In other words, the whole idea of a new Arab state called Palestine, based on some fabrication of history that we once upon a time occupied a Palestine, has to stop. In other words, between 48 and 67, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the Golan Heights, and the Gaza Strip were all in Arab control. Peace did not come. It's time to let go of this fabrication.
Yeah, I've many hours with Abu Mazen, before that Arafat, and then Abu Mazen was the head of all the, negotiating, the security committees of all the negotiations of Israel with the Palestinians, with the Syrians, with the Jordanians. And I know Abu Mazen will never go for a real solution what we call two states for two people.
Professor Amirav, you look like you disagree.
Yeah, I disagree because I see the situation as it is in the last, I would say, 30 years. We are speaking about the majority of the people of Israel, including the current Prime Minister, Netanyahu, who are ready for a two-state solution. And when we came to Camp David, I would like to remind you, I was there with Barak as his assistant, dealing with the possibility of having a two-state solution. Everybody agreed on that. The only problem was that I want to remind you because some people don't remember it. It was not the settlement.
I do remember because I was one of the only people who say to Barak, don't go there, because nobody will agree to end of conflict, no more claims, especially about Jerusalem.
Okay, so Jerusalem, I would like to mention it because it's very important. Jerusalem was the main, maybe the only obstacle for peace at that time.
And what about refugees?
Refugees was agreed, no problem.
Never.
Yes.
Arafat never thought that he has a mandate from the Palestinian diaspora to settle down for their dreams. No more claims. No more claims for refugees.
Let me ask Professor Amirav. Basically, the two-state solution, unless you can come up with such very good reason to think it will turn out differently, is a formula for setting up a mega Gaza overlooking the coastal plain, overlooking the only international airport, overlooking all your rail and road transport. What could possibly go wrong?
So I think we are getting off topic.
What could possibly go wrong?
I can give you a very short answer.
I want to bring it back to Jerusalem for 1 second. Yeah. And I think that we've accepted diplomacy over morality and truth for so long that has turned into truth. In other words, Jerusalem is not the issue. In 48, they had Jerusalem. That's when the PLO was created to destroy Israel. So if Jerusalem was the main source of the wars, we should have peace between 48 and 67, and we didn't. And it's not a popularity contest of who was for it and who's against it. It's what's right and what's true. Jerusalem was never an Arab capital or a holy Muslim city in the history of the world. Why are we giving into their narrative?
So, okay, I want to kind of go back to an earlier point that you made, Professor Amirav, about how moving this capital doesn't only, unfortunately, affect the Palestinians, it affects the entire Arab world. So I'd like actually in a moment to go to a sync from Jordan, where a parliamentarian is calling for an end to ties.
الآن بنطلع من هون على باب السفارة الأمريكية وبنحتج على هذا القرار. اثنين، بتمنى على الزملاء النواب تمسيك اتفاقية الذل والعار، اتفاقية وادي عربة. أما نفس البيانات ونرجو أنا بقول هذا.
Okay, now the parliamentarian we just saw is hardly the only person who is threatening these types of actions or threatening to call for types of actions like these. President Erdogan actually made a very similar call saying he would cut off ties. So how does that affect Israel internationally? How is this going to, this could very realistically
I actually find it humorous that Jordan is screaming now, because Jordan and 48 were the ones to put the wall in Jerusalem and create East and West Jerusalem, so they're actually the source of the problem. So they're screaming now that Trump is saying, look, we have to adopt truth and stop with this game. I'm happy to see them screaming. It's about time we stop giving into the vocal threats by the radical Islamists and start doing what's right and true, certainly for Israel.
We can discuss it, and we will continue to discuss it, and I'll tell you why, because Jerusalem is really the main obstacle for peace. And I saw it in Camp David.
But why wasn't it an obstacle when the Jordanians controlled it? Where were the Palestinians claiming Palestine?
I'm trying to explain.
When Ahmed Shukeri,
I'm trying to explain it exactly.
Claimed Palestine.
What
was he claiming?
So Jerusalem was and will be the main obstacle for peace. Now, speaking about any solution in Jerusalem, you have to understand that we are not speaking about Jerusalem, the 130 square kilometer. We are speaking about a very small area, 1 square kilometer, which is the old city. It's even not 1 square kilometer. It's only Temple Mount, which is much less than that. And this is an issue that is not between us and the Palestinians. Israelis don't understand it. Most Israelis, I tell them that it's between us and the Muslim world.
I agree with the professor, by the way.
They are surprised. They don't know. They thought it's a problem between Palestinians and Israelis.
I agree with the professor. One word. Okay. It is about the Muslim, between us and the Muslims. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is that the Temple Mount, when the Muslims built the mosque, was called Beit al-Muqdas, which means built on the temple. So the whole thing's an occupation claim. They occupy the Temple Mount, they build their mosque, and all of a sudden they have a claim. It's just it's ludicrous.
Well, unfortunately, we have to. I'm getting word right now that the president is gearing up to speak. So for those of you keeping up with us live, stay tuned until after the speech, where we will actually dive into the president's remarks. Now, if you come up with any questions during the speech, please comment them in the Facebook live stream, and I'll do my best to work them into the conversation. And please, again, stay tuned until after the speech. Right now, we go live to the White House. All right, so we're seeing now that it's going to be another few minutes until the president comes to speak. So in the meantime, we can continue discussing a little bit. So let's go to my next question. Unrest is, let's talk about the Palestinian Unity Agreement and how this actually might affect them. As the Unity Agreement began, we've actually seen, remarkably, a complete halt to attacks from Hamas.
Except for the lynch that just happened, except for the people who were murdered last week. Besides that, it's been nice and quiet.
Okay. Yeah. So besides that, it's been nice and quiet. But is this going to threaten all of that? Is this going to tear everything down? Because I think the one thing that was keeping the linchpin, I guess you could say, in the Palestinian unity talks was the idea that there might be hope for actual an agreement with Israel afterwards.
I hope it doesn't break the unity up, because the unity is great for us. And to have Fatah, who are the moderates, team up with a genocidal radical Islamic terrorist organization is wonderful. It takes the blinders off. The fact that it's quiet, we're always like, oh, it's quiet now, so everything's wonderful. Really? Everything's wonderful? Hamas is a charter that looks like a page out of Mein Kampf. Abbas is saying no filthy Jewish feet are going to step on the Temple Mount. And for some reason we think the quiet is wonderful. It's not wonderful. These people do not like us, not because of Israel, and not because of Jerusalem or the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. There's a religious-based argument here, and it's been going on for 70 years.
I do agree with Moshe Mirav that it's not only the Palestinians we are dealing with the Arab world, but here's exactly the problem, because Abu Mazen will never make a concession on Jerusalem, because then, and especially not a concession offered by Barak at those times, because he will be regarded in the Arab world as a traitor, the one who sold to the Jews what Salah ad-Din Ayyubi freed so many years ago. So it is a problem with the Arab world, but the Arab world doesn't negotiate about it. They put the Palestinian in front of it. The Palestinian can't arrive to an agreement and don't want to arrive to an agreement right now. And here we're stuck.
So do you not think that there's any sort of place that can be reconciled in between that ideology and, yes, I'll kind of come down off that horse and try to make some sort of concession with Trump in the picture?
Well, I don't think, I don't think that Trump can help it here, because let's be frank about it, we the Israelis, we don't think that we need a mediator here or somebody. It's the Palestinians. Palestinians should understand that if Trump's speech today is going to be the one that was actually offered to us, I think that the Palestinian lesson will be we should have talked to the Israelis and not try to negotiate with Washington about Jerusalem.
I see. Now, okay, back to sort of some of the threats that have been coming from the Palestinian world and the Arab world. They're saying they'll have days of rage in the wake of this decision. Is that the sort of rhetoric that we should be bowing down to? The idea that if we do it, then we'll be attacked?
I don't think it's rhetoric.
This rhetoric is heard here in Israel for the last 100 years. I mean, whenever the Palestinians are in a kind of pressure, they put violence as a solution.
Well, and that's my point.
No, it's a solution, it's a negotiation.
Of course, it's a solution to get into a negotiation.
Using violence, it's one way that the Palestinians negotiate with you.
The Palestinians say, these Israelis, they understand only power. This is what they understand. So we will give them. They said it in the 20s. In the 30s.
Well, there was Israel in the 20s or 30s. And, they were violent, and there's another reason for it.
And when it comes to Jerusalem, they have the support of the whole Muslim world.
But the whole Palestinian claim for statehood and nationhood is a giant hoax. Not because I say so, because they say so. If you look at the first edition of the Palestinian National Council, National Covenant, you will find that there is explicit, not implicit, explicit eschewing a rejection for claims of sovereignty over Judea and Samaria and Gaza. They specifically say that is not part of the Palestinian homeland. They only started claiming Judea and Samaria as part of their homeland when the Jews in 1967 took over the area. That was never their claim. When Ahmed Shukeri was head of the PLO, that wasn't his claim. His claim was for everything that was west of the Green Line. It wasn't for the claim for Judea and Samaria. And the trouble is, we're perpetuating that myth and supporting a giant hoax.
So the thing is that given that information, that even if we weren't perpetuating that myth, there are now millions of Palestinians living here and are making the claim, and allegedly want statehood.
And they're the enemy, and we should treat them as the enemy.
I would like
and if they're threats of violence, they must be met with counter threats. Like, for instance, you're the enemy, and it's immoral to give your enemy water, electricity, postal services, port services, fuel, etc., etc. And if you're violent, you'll be treated as a violent enemy.
I want to just answer something you said about that. There's a big problem here. There's the human rights issue. Does a person have a right to live? Of course they do. And then there's the national issue. The Palestinian problem, quote unquote, is not a humanitarian issue. In other words, the whole idea, the whole ideology of the Palestinians, that made-up name, was to destroy Israel. So let's stop making this to a humanitarian issue. The humanitarian issue was in 48 when Jordan, Syria, and Egypt built refugee camps for their own brothers and sisters. Not
Historically,
us.
you are right. I agree
Okay,
with
so
you.
therefore, this is not a humanitarian. This is an issue where there's an ideology to destroy Israel. And it doesn't matter if Jerusalem's in our hands or not in our hands. It's not about Judea and Samaria. Why are we making excuses for them? They say all of Israel. We say, no, they only want Judea and Samaria. Let's stop playing this game. They're enemies. They want us destroyed. End of story.
If you look at the emblem of every single Palestinian organization, whether it's the Fatah or the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or of course Hamas, you will see that Palestine is designated as the whole of the area from the river to the sea. So we're just fooling ourselves that you could actually come to some sort of stable agreement and placate the Palestinians by offering.
Let's return to Jerusalem. I mean, a speech about Jerusalem or recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, it's not a beginning of a new negotiation. I'm not saying that nothing can be negotiated, but Jerusalem, I mean, it's just c'est jamais trop tard pour bien faire. Just do the right thing after so many years.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be a start of a new Middle East and a new negotiation. It's not recognizing what is there for 70 years.
Yeah, I agree with him. I agree with him. I think that we have to speak today about Jerusalem, not about the conflict, not about history, not about.
But let me ask Professor Amir, do you dispute?
Especially that we don't negotiate here with the Palestinians; we negotiate between the Israelis.
Do you dispute Israeli sovereignty over Western Jerusalem?
No.
Do you? And so why would you object to America recognizing that and putting the embassy there?
But we are speaking now about two parts of Jerusalem. I wrote a lot about it. Jerusalem actually is three cities. If you want really to see it demographically, it's the Haredim, the ultra-religious, one-third are Arabs, Palestinians, most of them Muslims, most of them.
They're not Palestinians. They're not Palestinians. They're residents of Jerusalem.
Excuse me. And one-third are people like me, Zionists. You know that in the Day of Remembrance, the day before Yom HaAtzmaut, the Independence Day, we have the Tzfira, how do you
Siren.
Yeah. And I'm standing there, but I'm alone with some other 20-30% of the people. The Haredim are not standing. The Arabs are not standing.
This is only in some parts of Jerusalem.
Zion is not Zionist
let's just bring this back for 1 second to Jerusalem. I really, it kind of upsets me, depresses me to hear Jews talk about East and West Jerusalem. That term was created by Jordan to keep Jews out. Why do we want to go back to them and make believe that's a step for peace? Jordan came in, put a wall up, and called it East Jerusalem. And we're saying, well, that's a good idea. Let's go back to that for peace. It's ludicrous. We're like destroying ourselves. No, there's no East Jerusalem. It's been one city for 3,000 years. The Temple Mount is ours. The fact that they're there now is not wonderful. We're not going to destroy the mosque today, but let's not give it into the narrative.
But
when I came into office, I promised to look at the world's challenges with open eyes and very fresh thinking. We cannot solve our problems by making the same failed assumptions and repeating the same failed strategies of the past. Old challenges demand new approaches. My announcement today marks the beginning of a new approach to conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. This act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate only 6 months ago. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Presidents issued these waivers under the belief that delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace. Some say they lacked courage, but they made their best judgments based on facts as they understood them at the time. Nevertheless, the record is in. After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to that repeating the exact same form would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Acknowledging this is a fact is a necessary condition for achieving peace. It was 70 years ago that the United States, under President Truman, recognized the State of Israel. Ever since then, Israel has made its capital in the city of Jerusalem, the capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. Today, Jerusalem is the seat of the modern Israeli government. It is the home of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, as well as the Israeli Supreme Court. It is the location of the official residence of the Prime Minister and the President. It is the headquarters of many government ministries. Decades visiting American presidents state and met their Israeli counterparts in Jerusalem as I took a trip to Israel earlier this year. Jerusalem is not just over the past 7 decades, the Israeli people have built a country where Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths are free to live and worship according to their conscience and according to their beliefs. Is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall, where Christians walk the stations of the cross, and where Muslims worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, through all of these years, presidents representing the United States have declined to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In fact, we have declined to acknowledge any Israeli capital at all. But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace. In making these announcements, I also want to make one point very clear. This decision is not intended in any way to reflect a departure from our strong commitment to facilitate a lasting peace agreement. We want an agreement that is a for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved. The United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. I intend to do everything in my power to help forge such an agreement. Without question, Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in those talks. The United States would support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides. In the meantime, I call on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace, the universal yearning in every human soul. With today's action, I reaffirm my administration's longstanding commitment to a future of peace and security for the region. There will, of course, be disagreement and dissent regarding this announcement. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation. This sacred city should call forth the best in humanity, lifting our sights to what it is possible, not pulling us back and down to the old fights that have become so totally predictable. Peace is never beyond the grasp of those willing to reach it. So today we call for calm, for moderation, and for the voices of tolerance to prevail over the purveyors of hate. Our children should inherit our love, not our conflicts. I repeat the message I delivered at the historic and extraordinary summit in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. The Middle East is a region rich with culture, spirit, and history. Its people are brilliant, proud, and diverse, vibrant, and strong. But the incredible future awaiting this region is held at bay by bloodshed, ignorance, and terror. Vice President Pence will travel to the region in the coming days to reaffirm our commitment to work with partners throughout the Middle East to defeat radicalism that threatens the hopes and dreams of future generations. It is time for the many who desire peace to expel the extremists from their midst. It is time for all civilized nations and people to respond to disagreement with reasoned debate, not violence. And it is time for young and moderate voices all across the Middle East to claim for themselves a bright and beautiful future. So today, let us rededicate ourselves to a path of mutual understanding and respect. Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so I think one of the most shocking statements that he made right off the bat was that he spoke about how Jerusalem has been the ancient city of and capital of Israel since ancient times. So is he in effect, telling all the people who disagree with that fact, he's negating that for them?
He's just telling the truth.
So,
in other words,
okay, so in response to that, though, has he just made Israel and now possibly the U.S. into even more of a pariah state than they were?
In three words, he did deliver. He said
I would
he's
say
going
he
to
definitely
deliver.
did a presidential speech now, which I think surprises
hold on
everyone.
one second, hold on. Thank you. He apparently just signed the agreement, and it's official. The embassy will begin to move to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem has been recognized as the capital of the Jewish state by the United States. This is, as we expected, but more so, a very, very landmark decision. Again, back to the conversation, though. I mean,
right.
Are we more of a pariah state than we were before?
So, again, like I said, we've been playing with diplomacy over morality and truth for so long that we've ignored truth. What Donald Trump just did was sign truth. The fact that people are upset about that is a result of I would call it the Oslo effect. We've developed a new nation. We've developed a new narrative that's based on a fabrication of history. He just turned that around.
Professor Amirav, how do you react to this speech?
I don't see anything new in what he said. I don't see anything new between us and the Palestinians and the Muslim world, in a way that when we have peace, we will have a kind of a solution to Jerusalem. So what he brought is not a solution to Jerusalem. He brought war to Jerusalem. We are going to face now a one-sided act of the American people, or of the United States, that will bring a lot of violence all over. Let me finish.
Moshe,
let me finish.
He did say what will be decided between the two sides.
The way it will be the way the Arab world, the Muslim world, will understand it is that he is standing, instead of being a kind of a mediator between Israel and the Palestinians on one side, with the Israelis. So as an Israeli, I can be very happy with it. But for the peace process, I think it's very bad.
So to that end, he also said specifically that he is still a supporter of the two-state solution, and that he wants to continue to facilitate between Israel and the Palestinians so that those two sides, Israel and the Palestinians, can come up with solutions for themselves. Do you think that that's impossible at this point, then?
No, let him go and do it. I think he should bring peace to the Middle East. But why start with the most difficult issue, which is Jerusalem, one-sided, saying it to the whole world?
I find it absolutely infuriating, Professor, that somehow, some way, you believe the violence is coming from a statement of truth. Instead, the violence is coming from an ideology of hate. The blame of violence is not on Trump, it's not on truth, it's not on Jerusalem. It's on the people that for some reason you're so running after a deal with them that you want to hide truth and historical facts and give in to these people who have an ideology to kill you.
Let's suppose he didn't.
Doesn't make any sense.
Suppose he made a completely different declaration today. How would that bring peace to Syria, or to Yemen, or to Lebanon, or produce a more stable situation in Jerusalem, or subdue the jihadis in Sinai? I mean, it's, as I said before, Jerusalem is just an excuse for Muslim violence. It's not a reason for Muslim violence. I mean,
what will happen now?
Who knows? It depends.
Are we going to have peace next month?
No. Did you have peace last month?
Or are we going to have a war next month?
Hold on one second. Gentlemen, one second. 30 years ago, on 93, Yitzhak Rabin, rest in peace, Shimon Peres, rest in peace, with a lot of people behind them, signed a deal with a mass murderer, Yasser Arafat, and gave him guns and in the name of peace. And those who said no to it said, oh, but we have to bring peace. We gave him guns, and he pointed them at the Israelis. Enough with playing this masquerade game. What do you mean? Was there peace yesterday? Was there peace in 48 when they had Jerusalem? Enough. The peace is not coming, not because we have Jerusalem or Judea and Samaria. The peace is not coming because they have a national fabricated claim to destroy you. It's not our fault.
I would like to, however, acknowledge the very real possibility that we are now facing a future conflict in the immediate future. So I'd like to, on a security standpoint, how prepared are we to mitigate that issue, that conflict?
We're full prepared because this speech didn't change something. I mean, maybe the Palestinians will use violence as they used to. We have to be ready for that. But it was well done. I mean, Moshe, it's not starting a new negotiation. It's just recognizing what is the truth. And the indirect message to the Palestinians is, if you want to have peace, talk to Israel. Donald Trump can't deliver peace to the Middle East. Not here, not in Syria, not in Iraq, etc. I mean, what we can do is negotiating with the Palestinians, if they are ready to. If they are not going to be insulted for the rest of the decade and so on,
I think Donald
tough
Trump,
luck for them.
Speaking about the very near future, we are going now to a peace process or to a new intifada.
There is no peace process.
That's
because
what he
there is no
promised us.
partner for a peace process.
He promised us a peace process.
No, he said he supported peace. What would you offer Erdogan to change his policy? What would you offer? I mean, Turkey is not inimical to Israel because of anything that Israel does or doesn't do. Turkey is inimical to Israel for two reasons: what Turkey's become and what Israel is. Because what Turkey has become cannot be anything but inimical to Israel. For instance,
I think that now this is Jerusalem. I think we have to welcome it, to move the embassy. I mean, not us, the American will move the embassy. We have to move on and move on. Is it leaving the door open to negotiation with the Palestinians? And if you ask me, the next point, the next stage is to talk about the defensible borders of Israel. This is another thing that wasn't recognized. And remember the letter of President Bush from 2004? I think now it's the right time to say, okay, we understand about Jerusalem. The Jordan River is the defensible border of Israel. Let's talk about it now.
But I'm asking a question here.
Sure.
We are talking about negotiation. I mean, we all negotiate all kinds of things. I teach my students negotiation. When you have negotiations, you don't come to the table and you say, this is my resolution, this is how it will be.
You're right, but
now
nobody...
take it
Moshe, you're right, but nobody came to the table.
So I'm very surprised that he's putting
the
this
table is
position
there,
on
and
the
nobody
table.
arrived to the table.
I would, however,
if they want,
but
if the Palestinians want to negotiate, come to the table first.
I would
now
like
they will
to
come to
also
the
point
table.
out something.
what kind
I
of
don't know.
negotiation?
Now they come to the
what kind of
table.
I don't know.
what kind of
Now,
negotiation?
what do you think? They will come to the
if
table?
one
Can I
side,
clarify
if
something,
one
Professor?
side wants to annihilate you, so what kind of negotiation, what kind of compromise can you reach with him? That it only annihilate half of you?
So you have to ask.
I want to come back to Jerusalem for a second.
They
the
can't
president.
annihilate us.
Why
It's
is he
not-
so?
it's not-
Why is he so optimistic about?
Can I come back to
I'm
Jerusalem?
not saying I'm optimist. I'm
No,
saying
the president is very
Palestinians
optimistic.
should learn from that if you sit down and do nothing and don't really negotiate with the other side, somebody will decide. They thought for years, when Obama was the president, that when it will come to Washington, he will take their side. Now there is a new president, and they have to understand that if you sit down and do nothing, you got such a...
And what do you
So
think they
let's-
will understand? Now they will understand.
Let's, however, for
I
a
hope
moment,
so.
I'd like to put away
I hope so.
political ideologies aside. I'd like to go back to the fact that, as President Trump made mention of, this was a bill that was passed in 1995 by Congress and by the United States government. So in a sense, it's not even necessarily his decision. It's his decision to finally not ignore Congress.
But
in a sense.
nobody will take it this way. Everybody in the Middle East, what they understand from this speech, is just
It's a one-sided
Jerusalem
act
is
of
the
America.
capital of
it's a one-sided
Jerusalem.
act.
And the correct one. Not every one-sided act is the wrong act.
So why negotiate?
So one second, can I-
But Moshe,
Why
look,
negotiate?
I'll explain to you.
who are your negotiating partners? Look at the
It's
attitude.
great. We have
Look at the
Jerusalem. The American president
So
is
can
with
I
us.
just-
Why should we negotiate with
so
the
Professor-
Palestinians?
Precisely my
because-
point. Precisely my point. There's nothing
your
to
point.
negotiate. Precisely
You
my
think
point.
we don't have to negotiate?
We don't have
Professor,
to negotiate.
can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question?
Okay, we
Can
don't think
is
so.
Jerusalem, do the Muslims have a religious claim on Jerusalem?
I will tell you about the Muslims. The Muslims were insisting for years that Haram al-Sharif, which is only the mountain there, actually, it's not the old city, is theirs. They don't want it to be for Arafat or
But I'm
for
asking
the
another question.
I'm answering.
Yeah.
So the Arab world and the Muslim world are not interested in the borders of Jerusalem. They even don't know where all these villages are. They are interested in one place, which is the Haram al-Sharif.
And they have
Now,
freedom of
this-
access to it.
this
And they have
place-
freedom of religion
This
there.
place
They have
actually
freedom of
brought
religion
us in Camp David 2000, I want to remind you, to our failure.
But I'm
We
asking-
couldn't agree on this very tiny place there.
But
And
Professor,
when
I
we
was-
will agree on this tiny
Are the
place,
Palestinians
it's the
prepared
key.
to
It's the
sacrifice
key
statehood? Are the
for all the
Palestinians-
other
are
questions
Palestinians
that we
prepared to
have between us.
sacrifice statehood?
I don't
I
think
would
you're
like to
going
hear
to
it.
agree
But I was
about
asking you-
that. And remember, now it's not Camp David. There is a war around us. More than 500,000 people were murdered. 7, 8 new refugees are in the Middle East. Nobody thinks that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict about Jerusalem is the root of all problem. And if it's not the root of all problem, it's maybe not the solution either. So it's important for us to settle down with the Palestinians, but what they can learn now is that finally it arrived to Washington, and Washington said Jerusalem, which is obvious. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now sit down and think what you are going to do. I
What
mean,
are they
the
going to do?
Palestinians.
So
What are they
we
going
only
to
have a
do?
little bit of time left. I'd like to
If
get
you
some
ask
final
me,
words.
nothing,
Yeah, ask you, what are they going to do now?
Nothing. They will continue to say that this is problematic and try to go to the UN. Nobody has the country, not only on a silver platter, but not from the UN assembly.
I'd like
So
to get
you
some
think the
some final
situation
words.
from our side is
Yeah,
going to be better now, in the next few days,
No,
few weeks?
I'm not saying
Hold
it's
on,
better.
hold on, hold on, hold on.
I'm saying it's more
It
realistic.
depends what we do.
Can I
Hold on,
just
yeah,
get,
What
Professor,
you see
final
now,
words?
it's what you get.
So I'd
Can I-
like to
can I
get the
just-
final words. I'd like
Can
to
I
get
just
the
get some
final
final
words.
words here? Look, I asked you one simple question, and then you went around it. The Arabs do not have a claim on Jerusalem. It was never an Arab capital. The Muslims don't have a claim on Jerusalem. Even on the Al-Sharif mountain, they called it Beit al-Muqdash. They admit it was built on the temple. Therefore, when you say it's one-sided, yes, it's a side of truth. And that is the right thing to do. To give in to terrorism and to tell lies is not going to bring peace. When the Arabs realize that the world is not playing their game anymore, and we're not accepting their narrative, and if they want to make peace, they can make peace, not based on their narratives, then real peace will come.
No.
All right. Unfortunately, that is all
They
the
didn't
time we
have
have
a claim.
today.
Now they have a claim.
All right.
And they lose this round. And they will seek for another one.
All right, I'm sorry that I have to cut it off because I really wish that we could keep going, but that is unfortunately
I'm
all the
happy
time
that
we have
everybody's
today.
so optimistic here. I'm not optimistic at all.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today for
לשנה
this.
הבאה בירושלים, משה.
Shana, but that's all we have today for this special edition of our show. If you enjoyed this broadcast, please share it. Thank you to our guests for coming in, and of course to all of you for watching at home. And if you want more information about this developing story and news from Israel, make sure to go to ILTV.tv. Thank you so much.